Joy is noise. Pain is silence. In joy, the world becomes loud, with promise and brightness, and a sweet lie that swells like a carnival at dusk. In pain, all the lights go out, and you discover how vast the night really is. It is in that night that understanding begins, not because you are brave, not because you are chosen, but because every other distraction has been stripped from you like a mask torn off a sleeping face. When pain arrives, it is the physician who does not ask your permission before cutting. The anesthesia of hope is withheld, the scalpel is clean and cold, and truth, at last, is sterile. There is a reason why the happy often learn nothing. Pleasure is the tutor of forgetfulness. In pleasure, the will is indulged. In pain, the will is exposed. This is not cruelty. This is the curriculum of existence. The will does not negotiate. It does not ask if you have resting hours or sentimental reasons to be spared. It pushes and pulls and gnaws. A blind temptation harnessed to a body that hungers and a mind that imagines. Even when you satisfy it, the will does not fall asleep. It merely shifts its posture, points to a new horizon, and says, "There." Joy is the applause you hear when you finally arrive. Pain is the sound of the applause ending. It is the quiet afterward, when the room empties and you realize the stage is a wooden plank in a space that smells of dust, and the echo of your name no longer follows you to the exit. In that quiet, a strange thing happens. You begin to see, not because you deserve sight, but because there is nothing left to distract you. The body, which spent its days as messenger of comfort, begins to tell a different story. Your breath counts, your sleep fragments. Your hands remember the weight of what they once held. The mirror no longer says you, it says, more honestly, you are not what you told yourself you were. I say it plainly. The world is a mirror turned toward the will. You imagine the world is outside. You believe its hardness comes from the stone of its mountains and the law of its seasons. But the hardness you meet is in you. The mountain's indifference is only the reflection of your demand that it care. The season's cold is only the refusal of the universe to be your nurse. When pain comes, it does not enter from outside as an intruder. It rises from the center like a storm gathering in a sky that was always capable of thunder. To suffer is to finally learn the grammar of being. You thought happiness was proof that you were on the right path. You thought suffering meant you had failed. How tender, how naive, how human. Pain is not an indictment, it is a revelation. It places you under a clean light and reveals the architecture of your hunger. What you called love often concealed dependency. What you called purpose often rationalized ambition. What you called faith sometimes hid the panic of uncertainty. A wound cannot speak, but it is fluent in everything you refuse to hear. Its language is pressure. Its vocabulary is absence. Its dialect is the memory of what was torn away. When you hurt, you discover the exact circumference of your illusions. You can measure them by the ache. Here is where you thought the body would not betray you. Here is where you believed promises were oaths. Here is where you placed meaning like a fragile vase on a shelf and prayed the floor would never shake. The quake came, the vase fell. Suddenly you are sweeping up the shards with the same hands that set it there. It is humiliating and pure. There is no defense now. There is no argument. There is only the floor, the glass, the hand, the cut. And that cut is holy. Do not decorate it with hope. Do not numb it with slogans. Let it be clean. Let it be what it is. In the rooms of pleasure, the walls are mirrors. You mistake your reflection for the world. You see yourself smiling and believe reality has agreed to flatter you. But in the house of suffering, the mirrors are removed. Bare walls, bare floor, unadorned ceiling, the architecture of the real. No one applauds. No one arrives with gifts. No narrative ties itself into a neat ribbon to reassure you that everything happens for a reason. The only reason is that the will desired, and where desire exists, disappointment shadows it like a second sun that burns without light. You do not learn this by reading. You learn it by burying days that do not return. You learn it by kneeling beside the ruin you call a plan. The will is restless. It multiplies its demands. If you quench one thirst, another throat appears, parched and righteous. You chase a horizon that moves as you move. It is close. you tell yourself. After this achievement, after this warmth, after this confirmation, the horizon remains a beautiful lie painted on the nearest wall. You step forward, and the wall moves back. You run, and the wall runs with you. One day, you cannot run. Then the paint stops moving. You place your hand upon the wall and feel the cold surface. In that stillness, without motion, you finally see. It was not the world that promised to be yours. It was you who promised yourself the world. Reality did not break its vow. You broke your own. Pain does not comfort, but it corrects. Joy amuses, pain instructs. The error is not in feeling joy. The error is in believing joy is knowledge. Joy is a soft light in a room where the furniture is arranged for your convenience. Pain switches on the harsh white of a hospital corridor and reveals the stains. It is not a pleasant lighting. It is the only honest lighting we have. We recoil because the truth makes beauty look like a costume. But look longer. There is a beauty in the unadorned. There is a beauty in the bones of things. When we are exiled from the sweet banquet of contentment, we are forced to eat the plain bread of what exists. We discover it nourishes us more deeply than the feast that left us hungry for feast. Do not mistake me for a preacher of despair. I am not saying life cannot offer warmth. I am saying warmth is not wisdom. Wisdom is the scar that no longer needs to bleed to be believed. At first, the scar is an accusation, a trace of violence, a reminder that the world is not your servant. Later, the scar becomes a stanza of a poem written by a hand you cannot name. Later still, it takes on the quiet dignity of a road you traveled and survived. You do not show it off. You do not hide it. You simply know it is there. And because you know, you do not pretend. To the mind that suffers, time becomes granular. Minutes stretch. Hours widen. The calendar's polite boxes cease to hold you. You live in the intervals between pulses of ache. You count breaths. Every inhalation is proof that you have not been abandoned to the closed room of non-being. This is not dramatic. This is the smallest arithmetic of endurance. Joy tells you life is abundant. Pain shows you life is exact. The exactness is brutal and clarifying. It is precise as a blade. It is clean as the truth. In suffering, loneliness is not merely the absence of others. It is the absence of the illusion that others can save you from your own condition. How heavy that sounds, and yet how strangely kind. The crowd is a narcotic. Its noise muffles the small, honest voice that says, "You are finite." When pain removes you from the crowd, not physically, perhaps, but inwardly, you begin to hear that voice. It does not flatter. It does not threaten. It simply tells you what you are and what you are not. It tells you that you are a soft animal made of nerves, that you are bound to decay, that you are a brief syllable in a sentence that spans millennia. The voice then grows silent. It has said enough. The rest you must discover by not running. There is an austerity to truth that many cannot bear. We prefer the comfort of explanations that place us at the center of a benevolent drama. If pain arrives, we want to believe it is a lesson sent by a kindly teacher who will grade us gently at term's end. But suffering does not grade. It measures. It measures without pity, without malice, without interest. It tells you how much of your joy was fabricated, how much of your love was bargaining, how much of your certainties were merely the expensive clothes you tailored for an animal that will die. When you see this, if you do not look away, a different kind of compassion opens in you, not the sweet pity that smiles from a safe distance, but the compassion founded on recognition. You see your own wound in the wound of the world. And then you stop asking why the knife was sharp. You accept that the knife is sharp. You stop asking why the world does not cradle your dreams. You accept that dreams are the theater of the will, and the world is stone. Acceptance is not defeat. It is the refusal to sweeten the medicine. It is swallowing what is. At first, it scorches. Then it enters the blood. Then you become clear. Clarity does not erase pain. It removes the second pain, the pain of insisting reality be otherwise. When that insistence quiets, suffering loses its tail of resentment. What remains hurts, but it no longer accuses. What remains is the simple fact of being alive under conditions that do not bend to your consolations. Listen to the room in you that has no furniture. It is the room that remains when the party ends, when the friends leave, when the lover sleeps, when the applause fades, when the doctor closes the file. That room is not empty. It contains the exact weight of your existence. In that room, there are no slogans. There is no stage. There is only the low hum of being and the awareness that accompanies it. You can fear this room forever, or you can sit down on its floor and let your eyes adjust to the dark. If you are patient, a shape appears, not a guardian, not a savior, but a plain mirror. It reflects nothing mythic back to you, only your face without its masks, the eyes without their performance, the mouth without its rehearsed inferences. You will want to smash the mirror. Do not. Watch. Breathe. Watch again. Pain teaches you this patience. Pleasure rarely has time for it. In pleasure, our attention disperses. We become social. We become decorative. We grow articulate about things that do not matter. We learn the choreography of charm. The surface becomes a country we mistake for home. In pain, the surface cracks. We fall through. We land in the undercountry, where speech is costly and appearances are useless. There, words are not inexpensive currency, tossed at every minor emotion. There, a sentence is a shelter. There, silence is not a void to be filled, but a fabric to be held. You stop performing, you start existing, and in the drastic relief of that difference, you learn. Consider how much of your life was dedicated to avoiding precisely this. The rituals of distraction, the commerce of constant novelty, the religiosity of optimism, the way you genuflected before the shrine of "it will get better," not because you examined the proposition, but because it tasted sweet on the tongue. When pain pries that sweetness from your mouth, you feel betrayed. But it is sugar that has betrayed you. When it dissolves, the palate becomes honest again. You taste the bread of reality. It is simple, it is coarse, it sustains. What is left to want, once you know the structure of wanting? Less. Less wanting, not because you are saintly, but because you are tired of bargaining with a wind. This is the beginning of freedom, which is never ecstatic and rarely visible. Freedom is the subtraction of demand from being. You are still vulnerable, still mortal, still bound to lose what you cherish. But the demand that these truths not be true loosens its grip. In that loosening, something like peace arrives, unannounced. It is not joy. Joy is an event. Peace is a climate. It has no dramatic entrance. It is the temperature of a day that does not insist on your mood. If you ask where it came from, it will not answer. It does not justify itself. Like pain, it is a form of reality recognized by those who stop arguing with the sky. I do not offer you rescue. Rescue is a miracle we market to ourselves because we cannot bear the slow disciplines of seeing. I offer you a lamp. It is small. It does not outshine the night. It makes a circle of light in which you can sit and examine the contents of your mind without pretending they are more than they are. If you move, the circle moves. If you fall asleep, the lamp keeps burning. This is all. You may call it bleak if you hunger for a theater of hope, but if you hunger for the taste of what is true, you will find this light sufficient. It is the kind of sufficiency that does not impress a crowd, the kind that spares you the humiliations of pretending to be spared. Does pain end? Sometimes. Often it changes shape. Sometimes it wanders into another room and you forget it for a while. Sometimes it lies down beside you and breathes at the same pace. Sometimes it leaves you for years and returns, older, with fewer teeth, but the same authority. You do not command it. You learn to greet it without panic. You prepare a chair. You say, "I know you." It nods. It says nothing. The two of you sit, and in the quiet, the necessary knowledge arranges itself without fanfare. This is why pain teaches more than joy. Joy collects us into performance. Pain returns us to substance. Joy is the dream of a face lit from below by a candle. Pain is the face in daylight. If you must have a line to carry with you, carry this. The wound is where the will stops, pretending to be the world. In that interruption, you become capable of seeing beyond your demand. Not beyond the world, there is no beyond worth speaking of, but beyond the demand that the world satisfy you. The difference is everything. It is the difference between worshipping comfort and acknowledging reality. It is the difference between playing a role in a comedy of noise and standing still in the silence that names you without praise or blame. When you stand there long enough, you notice the wind. You notice the way light drifts across a wall and vanishes without asking permission. You notice the weight of your own hands, how they have worked and failed and still open. You notice that the heart keeps its own counsel. You notice that suffering has not disqualified you from existence. It has enrolled you. You are a student now, which is to say you do not command the lesson. You receive it. You do not pass or fail. You continue. The curriculum is as long as your days. And when someone asks you softly what you have learned, you will not give them speeches. You will not give them marketing. You will not string together metaphors to disguise the bruise. You will say, I learned that I am finite. I learned that I am not owed. I learned that love without demand becomes gentler because it no longer negotiates with fear. I learned that the world does not speak my language, but it supplies me with air. I learned that joy is a visitor. I learned to offer it tea when it knocks and to let it go when it leaves. I learned to sit with pain until it told me nothing, which was its final gift. This is the beauty of wounds. They do not argue. They insist. They insist on reality. They insist until you stop insisting back. Then, in the echo that follows, a different silence comes. Not the silence of isolation, but the silence of agreement with what is. In that quiet, you will find no triumph. You will find no banner raised over a conquered city. You will find only a small, exact recognition that suffering has made you less theatrical and more true. Your voice lowers, your eyes clear. You stop selling futures to your heart. You walk, you sit, you breathe. You do not mistake anesthesia for peace again. Joy will return, as it does, briefly. You will smile. You will not worship. The window will be open. Air will move. And somewhere in you, the lamp remains lit, not to banish the night, but to accompany it. This is enough. This is knowledge without intoxication. This is the beginning of sobriety, which is the edge of wisdom. And if you must call it something sweeter to carry it into your next day, you may call it tenderness, not towards yourself as a project, but towards existence as it is, which has always been both a claim on you and a refusal to be claimed. So we begin here, where the carnival is quiet and the hospital light is clear. So we begin here, where the will grows tired of performing and the mirror stops flattering. So we begin here, where pain's lessons are not consolations, but instruments. If you can bear them, they will cut away what things it cannot bear. If you cannot, they will remain at the edge of your vision, waiting, patient as stone. Either way, they are the true curriculum. Either way, they outlast the festival music. Either way, they will be with you when you close your eyes. Joy is noise. Pain is silent. Now you have heard the silence. Now, if you wish, learn to listen. There was a man once no different from you. He believed life would reward him for effort, that virtue and talent were currencies the universe would recognize. He worked, he built, he loved all, with the quiet conviction that things would one day align, that joy was the rightful end of struggle. And for a time, it seemed so. His days were full, his nights soft. The sun did not argue with him. He looked at his reflection and saw meaning, order, promise. Then one morning, the phone rang and the world folded. A diagnosis, a betrayal, a loss, it doesn't matter which. Pain doesn't need specifics, it needs only entry. What matters is that something in him cracked the invisible hinge that held his certainties together. Suddenly, the familiar world grew strange. His laughter sounded rehearsed. The streets he walked became foreign cities. Time no longer passed, it lingered. The clock ticked, but not for him. He tried to resist at first. He read the right books. He repeated affirmations he did not believe. He recited the mantras of the well-adjusted. Everything happens for a reason. This, too, shall pass. Stay positive. But the words died in his mouth like birds caught in fog. He began to see that such phrases were not truth, they were defense mechanisms for those still afraid of seeing. Optimism is often just fear wearing perfume. The more he struggled to restore the old harmony, the deeper the dissonance grew. His mind clawed at explanations, but explanations are the last refuge of the will. He wanted a villain, a logic, a pattern, anything that would make suffering feel earned. But pain, he discovered, is innocent. It does not justify itself. It simply is. He stopped fighting when exhaustion became more honest than hope. That was the beginning of learning. He withdrew not as an act of courage, but of necessity. Solitude was not chosen, it was given. The days grew long, the air became a mirror. He began to hear the quiet machinery of his own thoughts, the constant humming of wanting to be loved, to be respected, to be remembered, to be free of wanting. And he saw how every form of joy he had known was simply the temporary absence of these hums. Even in happiness, the will had whispered, more. It was then he remembered a night from his youth. He had been a boy lying awake, listening to the rain. His father's voice, calm, weary, had said, "Pain makes a man real, son. Everything else just makes him busy." He had not understood then. He thought his father meant endurance. Now he saw it differently. Pain does not make you strong, it makes you accurate. He began to walk differently, not proudly, not brokenly, but slowly, as if every step were a negotiation with gravity. The noise of ambition fell away. The crowd's applause no longer seduced him. He started noticing the small things. That joy had made him overlook the texture of silence, the honesty of aging faces, the sound of his own breath. These were not comforts, they were confirmations. They whispered, "You are still here. That is enough." Sometimes he would sit by the window and watch people hurrying below faces lit by screens, eyes chasing futures they had been told to desire. He felt no superiority, only recognition. He had been one of them, and in some way still was. The will does not die. It quiets when it has been starved of illusion. He realized what Schopenhauer meant when he wrote, "The world is my representation." The chaos outside was not chaos itself. It was the mirror of the will within, projected onto streets, jobs, relationships. Each person was a private storm disguised as a citizen. He wondered if there was a way to live without this storm, not as a saint, but as one who has ceased demanding paradise. He read, he meditated, he tried to feel joy again, but now joy frightened him because it came with the old delusion that it could stay. He learned to sip it, not swallow it whole. He learned to nod when it left, not beg it to remain. In that moderation, a strange peace took root. It was not joy, it was the absence of fever, and it felt like truth. He began to see others differently. When someone laughed too loudly, he heard the tremor of insecurity beneath it. When someone bragged, he saw the thin wall they built against their own despair. When someone cried, he no longer felt pity, only solidarity. He understood what Schopenhauer called midlight compassion, born not from virtue, but from shared suffering. To know pain is to see the same wound in every face. You stop competing, you start recognizing. This was not enlightenment, it was clarity, a less glamorous but more honest condition. He did not renounce life, he simply ceased to negotiate with it. The will still whispered. He just stopped answering every time. When pain returned, as it always does, in waves, not catastrophes, he did not ask, "Why me?" He asked only, "What illusion is this burning away?" And every time, something fell off. The vanity of being special, the arrogance of being in control, the childish faith that the universe had a moral duty to be kind. In losing these ornaments, he did not feel poorer, he felt lighter. For the first time, he could look at the world without pleading eyes. There was a morning, unremarkable, quiet, when he woke and realized the ache had not vanished, but it had changed temperature. It no longer burned. It pulsed softly, like a reminder of where he had been. The pain had become memory, and the memory had become understanding. He went to the mirror. The face staring back was older, yes, but not defeated. There was a stillness in it, a stillness that did not need explanation. He whispered, not to anyone, but to the air. Joy gave me laughter, but pain gave me sight. And the air, being wiser than men, did not answer. It simply moved through him. He understood then that joy had never been a teacher. It had been a visitor, a brief guest offering entertainment. Pain, however, had been a resident, shaping the architecture of his inner house. It was pain that rearranged his priorities, that humbled his demands, that cleared the fog of delusion. Pain had been the sculptor, and he the reluctant marble. Joy had decorated, pain had transformed. He did not preach this discovery. The truly awakened never do. He carried it quietly, like a lantern. One holds low to the ground enough to see the next step, never enough to illuminate the world. Others, seeing the glow, sometimes asked what light he carried. He would smile faintly and say, "It's not light, it's what remains after the fire." And so he lived not joyfully, not sorrowfully, but lucidly. Lucidity became his peace. Suffering became his teacher. And in that strange equation, he found what joy could never give: freedom from the demand to be happy. And so the man came to understand what the joyful never learn: that the purpose of suffering is not punishment, but purification. Pain had taken everything from him, his certainties, his ambitions, his illusions, and in doing so had left behind something no joy could ever give: the absence of delusion. He did not become happy, he became still. Stillness is not joy's opposite, it is its maturity. He no longer prayed for light without shadow. He prayed only to see clearly, even in darkness. And clarity came not as revelation, but as recognition. The world had not changed. He had simply stopped demanding that it change for him. He learned that the absence of suffering is not peace, it is anesthesia. And he wanted no anesthesia anymore. He wanted to feel everything, even the ache of existing, because in that ache lay the only truth that did not lie. He walked through his days quietly. Sometimes a faint sadness followed him like a shadow, but it was gentle now, almost kind. He did not chase it away. He knew it was the trace of what had taught him. To deny it would be to deny his own teacher. When others asked him what he had found in all that pain, he smiled, not with arrogance, but with mercy. And he said only this: "I have found that joy decorates life, but pain defines it." Then he would fall silent, for words could only diminish what he now understood: that the greatest lesson suffering gives is not endurance, but humility. That nothing lasts, not even despair. That to live is to bend with the wind and call the bending grace. He would sit by the window in the evening, and as the last light folded over the horizon, he would whisper not to the sky, not to God, not to himself, but to the great indifferent rhythm of existence: "You have broken me open, and in that breaking I have seen." The wind did not answer, but in the silence that followed, he felt understood. And that, perhaps, was the truest joy of all, the joy born not from fulfillment, but from the acceptance that fulfillment was never owed. The lantern burns low, the night is still vast, but he no longer fears the dark, because now he knows the wound was never the end. It was the beginning of sight,